The Fantastic Four has to be one of my favorite superhero movies of all time. It had action, comedy, and most of all, Johnny, which in my opinion was the highlight of this film. And with the new Deadpool movie coming out having a Human Torch cameo, it brought back so many memories of this movie that I just had to make a what if about Deku having Johnny's powers. And let me just say, I had a blast making it. So if you're going to enjoy this video and want to see more Flame Quirk Deku, then check these videos out on my channel. But with that out of the way, ladies and gentlemen, flame on! We begin our story on the day that Bakugo would unlock his quirk. Everybody in the classroom would be praising him and telling him how great of a hero he's gonna be. Even Deku would be in the midst of all that. And so, as everybody would be praising Bakugo, Deku would actually be grabbing a crayon to write a little letter for Bakugo, or like a little sign, I guess you could say, saying, "You're the best, Kachan." And that's what he would write in kanji or whatever, you know what I mean? And so, right as this would be happening, Deku would notice that the crayon that he's using is actually turning into a liquid, and he would look down at the paper only to look at his hand, seeing that he was completely lit ablaze. Everybody in the classroom's attention instantly would divert to Izuku, as they would all be like, "Whoa, he's on fire!" The teacher immediately would be like, "Everybody get out!" And immediately everybody would go rushing out of the classroom being like, "Get out of the way, get out of the way!" Everybody but Bakugo, who would just stare at Izuku, who unlocked this quirk with his mouth wide open, as suddenly the teacher would bust in the classroom aiming the fire extinguisher at Izuku, as he would just shoot it right in his face, and Deku would just be sitting there unscathed, unharmed, just sitting there on his lap, right? As the teacher would ask Deku what that was, how in the world he lit himself ablaze without burning, and suddenly he would think to himself, "I guess you got a flame quirk, kid." Deku in this moment would just be sitting there with all of his clothes burned off, covering his thingy-majigger, as he's like super embarrassed, and his teacher would just look at him and be like, "Come on, Izuku." She would just grab the young boy, with Bakugo watching this whole thing, and him just thinking to himself, "Deku has a good quirk too. He doesn't really know what to think or how to feel about it, but all he knows is that he's a little jealous. I mean, yeah, he's capable of making explosions, but from what he's seeing, Deku's gonna have a quirk similar to what Endeavor has," and that kind of made Bakugo jealous. Also, the fact that everybody's praises immediately stopped, it made Bakugo wonder, is Deku gonna be a rival or what? But before he could even continue thinking all of these thoughts, and you know, obviously I need a little bit of time to decide whether Deku and Bakugo were gonna get along or not in this video, because honestly, I'm really not too sure. Like, if I'm being honest, I don't know, because Bakugo still hasn't gotten that cocky since he still is a kid, but he still is kind of a jerk. So I'm just thinking about it like, what should I do? Because it's just the fact that I haven't really thought this story through quite much, you know, if I'm being honest. Like, I just sat down and I started, you know, talking about whatever it is that I was thinking, and you know, hopefully this turns out to be kind of good, because I have that 3 a.m. motivation right now. So everything is going to be completely off the dome, and I have no idea what I'm really like going to be doing with the story. But considering the fact that I have a bunch of Flame Deku stories, I think it should turn out fine. Anyways, what would pretty much go down is we would find Izuku at the Quirk Doctor, and Inko would just be sitting there with Deku, as she would say, "Oh my, Izuku, you seem to have inherited your father's quirk, but it's a little different." As from here, Izuku would just look at her with this huge smile on his face, thinking, Mom, you gotta tell Dad. You gotta tell Dad." So Inko, grabbing her phone, would FaceTime Hisashi? I don't know how to say his name. But she would FaceTime Hisashi, and instantly, dude would just crack the biggest smile of his life, thinking to himself that his kid inherited a type of evolution of his quirk, I guess you could say, because he had like flame breathing, and now Izuku has this incredible power to engulf his body in flames and not be burned at all. That little weakness that Endeavor has of like, if he uses too much flames, he could like get himself killed, because of the fact that his body, like, it can handle it, but there's like a limit, you know what I mean? Like, you can't go too crazy with the flames, you know what I'm saying? But Deku doesn't even have that. I mean, we've seen in the Fantastic Four movies, which is what I'm going to be basing this entire what if off of. I'm not going to be going with the interpretation of the comics because I'm just not a comic reader, but I am a 2000s kid. And that means that I grew up with the Fantastic Four movie with Johnny as, Steve Rogers, what's his name? The actor, Chris Evans. Yeah, Chris Evans, which means that I grew up with Chris Evans' interpretation of the Human Torch. And I just love the goofball approach that they had. So that's exactly how Izuku's going to be carrying himself. Like, Deku's going to be really cocky. He's going to grow up popular. He's going to be cool with the girl. It's just going to be a blast covering Izuku's new personality and all of these cool things that are going to come with it. So let's get into the actual story. What I can see happening here is Deku would grow up and just have a completely 180-degree change of how everything used to be in his life. Deku's gonna be living an entirely different life, and all of this is gonna be due to him having a quirk. However, one thing is sort of gonna be staying the same: Bakugo not liking Deku. Or at least for a while it's gonna stay the same, because I want them to have a bit of a rivalry growing up. Because Bakugo sort of views Izuku as a rival, he would just stay away from him, not really talking to him, and Izuku would wonder why it is that everybody else seems to like him, but Bakugo. He's confused and he doesn't really get what's going on, but he does know one thing: he's gonna be number one, not Bakugo. And so Deku would have a confidence to say that and just brag about, not brag, but just kind of announce it to everybody, saying that one day he's gonna be number one. And that would be something that Deku constantly says. So pretty much a couple of things would start to boil over. Number one, Bakugo always made it clear to Deku that he was gonna be number one, but he never did exactly fight Izuku, just due to the fact that they were at school. He didn't see Izuku as weak, instead seeing him as a rival. So Bakugo would train a lot with his quirk and make sure that one day, if it ever came to it, he could beat Izuku. And so one day after Izuku would finally get out of practice, him and a bunch of friends would actually practice to a sport. I'm not exactly going to say which one, just imagine your favorite sport. Izuku would pretty much get out with his friends and they'd be having a great time, with them basically telling Izuku that not only is he going to be number one at being a hero, but it looks like he's also going to be number one at, insert sport here, I guess you could say, right? So everybody's just beginning to hype Deku up, and Deku would be having a huge smile on his face as Bakugo, listening to all that, would say, "Oh, Deku, I hear you're gonna be number one. You've been saying that for quite a long time, but I'm just not so sure about that. Cause remember, I'm gonna be number one, not you, Deku." And so Izuku, hearing that name, would think to himself, "It's been a while since you've called me that, Bakugo, and I gotta say, I don't really miss it. But I am wondering, what makes you so sure that you're gonna be number one? After all, my quirk practically guarantees me at least second place. But for you, you'll be lucky to crack into the top 10. As he would say that with a smile, looking at Bakugo, sort of coming back with an insult, because even though everybody else heard Deku understands exactly what he was calling him by that: useless. And he was not going to be letting that slide under any circumstances. So Bakugo, hearing that, would just, pose into the fighting position, saying, "You want to say that again, Deku?" As he would throw an explosion at the face of Izuku, and Deku's face would light up in flames as he would say, "You'll be lucky to crack the top 10. With Bakugo looking at him and being like, "Damn you, Deku!" Instantly, a huge ball of flame would shoot out from that area, and the students that were actually walking next to Izuku would immediately run out of there, being like, "Come on, we gotta get out of here." As Deku would turn towards Bakugo, and the both of them would go at it. Bakugo throwing explosions at the direction of Izuku, and Izuku shooting flame balls at the direction of Bakugo. Bakugo dodging them, and Izuku getting hit with a couple of explosions. Deku's body would light ablaze completely, and his clothes would just instantly be covered in flames as he would rush back in, landing a blow right on Bakugo's face, with Bakugo turning towards him angrily and throwing an explosion in his face. But Deku shooting a huge amount of flames at the direction of Bakugo would send him crashing into a wall, as Bakugo and Deku would just continue going at it. But as this would be happening, you would just see a smile crack on both of their faces as they're both they're literally having fun. And so it would be in this moment that as they're continuing on with the fight, Deku would start winning slowly but surely, and suddenly a teacher would bust into the classroom being like, "Cut it out!" shooting a fire extinguisher at Deku and Bakugo, as instantly Deku would just look towards the direction of Bakugo and just start busting out into laughter, with Bakugo not doing the same but just kind of looking at the direction of Izuku and being like, "Guess you're not as weak as I thought, Deku." Just kind of looking away, acknowledging Izuku as, you know, someone equal to him, you know what I mean? And Izuku would look at him and say, "Guess you still got it, Kachan," as they would sort of just look at each other for an instant, smile, and then look away, with Bakugo being like, "So, what happens now?" And the teacher just being like, "You know what's gonna happen. Go to the principal's office." And so Deku and Bakugo from that day would end up getting grounded, but it was almost as if like they stopped having that like weird, like foggy, like tension that used to be there before. Deku eventually one of these days walked up to Bakugo and said, "Hey, that last fight was pretty fun. What do you say we help each other become heroes? Let's start training together." With a huge smile, Bakugo seeing this would say, "Whatever, nerd. I guess I'll train with you, only because I might get stronger." As this would pretty much be the beginning to an incredible friendship. Deku and Bakugo would both end up becoming like the bestest of friends from this point forward. Mind you, they're in 6th grade. And so that means that they have approximately 2 more, right? Like 7th and 8th grade. For the next 2 years, Deku and Bakugo would be like the best of friends, and like they train after school every single day. Deku's firepower is like insane at this point. Deku has learned how to turn up the flames so unbelievably much, and Bakugo has such insane heat resistance to this point where like he might as well have Endeavor's body resistance to heat. So whenever Deku fights Bakugo, he has to literally go up to insane levels that start to melt the surrounding like things around him. And Bakugo, well, Bakugo, that's like the level of heat that Bakugo can't handle. So Bakugo eventually ended up kind of acknowledging that Deku, yeah, he's the stronger of the two. With Deku learning how to control higher and higher intervals of flame, it quickly became super apparent to both of them that Deku was the main guy. And so Bakugo pretty much ended up yielding, being like, "Dude, I don't like eventually character development would happen where Bakugo sort of realizes like Deku's gonna be number 1 and he'll be number 2, but he won't be too far behind." And that's just sort of going to be the dynamic that they have going forward, with Bakugo constantly always being like, "But I'll snag that number 1 spot away from you somehow, Deku. I'll get more saves than you." And Deku would just look at him and say, "In your dreams, I'll make sure to stay up day and night to make sure that I get more saves than you." They both just like have this like really cool like dynamic between each other, and eventually the day would come where the 10 months of training would be a thing. By the way, you guys might be wondering why I'm not exactly mentioning the Sludge Villain incident or All Might meeting Deku, and that's just due to the fact that, well, it never happens. And yeah, it's kind of sad, but yeah, it just never happens. Deku doesn't get caught by the Sludge Villain because instead of Deku getting bullied by Bakugo, Deku and Bakugo actually make their way towards the arcade, not even the arcade, but they just start training, and they would make their way towards Dagoma Beach, where Deku and Bakugo would have actually decided to get up like on their physical like aspects and stuff like that. Deku and Bakugo for these next 10 months aren't really going to be focusing on using their quirks as much, since their quirks are already insane. Instead, the two of them are actually going to be focusing on learning martial arts and learning how to actually get stronger with their physical bodies. This would be something that would gravely help Bakugo, and the two of them would actually promise not to use their quirks for the next 10 months. So every single day, Deku and Bakugo would just go at it, training on Dagoma Beach, hand-to-hand combat, making their way towards like boxing gyms and Muay Thai places and karate places. Just like those are the 3 things that they would mainly focus on. Going to the gym afterwards and pretty much crashing at each other's houses whenever they get the chance. Eventually the 10 months would be over, and Deku and Bakugo would be dropped off by Mitsuki at UA High, where both of them would end up just walking over there looking super cool. Everybody just kind of looking at them and just knowing that those two are emitting some crazy aura. Deku would be actually the same height as Bakugo, and the both of them would just be walking through everything with it almost looking like a light is coming off of them. Bakugo would have lost that whole like bullying side of him and would have learned to be humble, more so like the Bakugo that we actually get in later seasons, that, you know, even though he does yell and he is a bit of a jerk, he's like, not actually a jerk, you know what I mean? That's just how he is. So what would pretty much end up taking place is they make their way inside, they take the test, and eventually they find out that they're separated, with Deku thinking to himself that that might be a good thing, since they probably would have destroyed every single robot had the two of them had the chance to work together. And so Deku would eventually find himself outside in the robot portion, as he would just be thinking to himself that he can't wait. This is only the beginning, and also thinking to himself that he can't wait to crush Bakugo's score either. As, you know, as more and more people would begin to come outside, Deku would eventually notice a girl looking super worried at the front, and thinking to himself that he's gonna go help that cute girl out, he would begin walking towards that direction, when suddenly Ida would go to grab onto Izuku's shoulder to stop him, but Deku's shoulder would quickly light a blaze on fire, as Deku would turn to Ida and say, "Sorry, got no time to talk, a damsel's in distress," making his way towards the back where Uraraka's at, with Ida thinking to himself, "A flame quirk, he must be powerful." And so Deku, making his way towards Uraraka, would just instantly ask her, "Hey, what's wrong?" She would turn towards the direction of Deku and say, "Oh, it's nothing. I guess I'm just a little worried for the exam, you know? This is gonna determine the rest of our lives." Deku would look at her straight in the eyes with this like gaze of like a flirting gaze, and she would just start blushing a little bit as Deku would say, "Don't worry, I'll help you out if you need anything. Just call me. The name's Torch." As he would then go on to look at her and say, "But I don't think you'll have to worry about that. You're gorgeous, and I'm sure you're here for a reason. Your quirk's probably amazing." She would instantly start blushing super hard, and Deku would just walk away, just kind of like waving at her. Eventually, Present Mike would say, "What are you guys waiting for? There's no countdowns in a real battle. Go, go, go!" As instantly Deku would say, "Flame on!" and shoot straight towards the direction of the robots faster than Ida could even process. He would instantly shoot like a gigantic blast of fire that would scorch the robot's torso off, leaving only the legs behind, smiling as he would turn towards the direction of other robots and create flame constructs much like Endeavor would, eventually creating a gigantic flaming fist that he would punch 7 robots, leaving a gigantic like fist burned into the ground, as he would just go through destroying robot after robot after robot, obliterating a bunch of them, making sure that he's not like destroying everything so that other people have a chance, but just racking up so many robots that Bakugo won't be able to keep up. Because he's not exactly trying to destroy the entire thing, he just wants to destroy Bakugo's score. So Deku would destroy robot after robot after robot, and eventually the 0-pointer would finally be unveiled, with Deku thinking to himself that he knows exactly what's going through Bakugo's head, to beat that thing to prove that he's stronger than Deku. And Deku would just be thinking to himself, "Not gonna happen. I'm gonna defeat mine too." As he would instantly turn the flames on, shooting towards the direction of the 0-pointer, as he would hear "Torch" being yelled out by Uraraka. As Izuku in this moment would smirk and like fly as fast as he possibly can towards the 0-pointer, as he would shoot such incredible flames right at the stomach of the 0-pointer that would melt a hole straight through it, looking like Natsu's like fire dragon roar, like that's what it looks like, and like the 0-pointer just falls over as Deku would fly towards Uraraka, and he would come shooting out of the explosion, with Uraraka being like, hey, you're gonna catch me on fire too." But Deku would look at her and say, "What do you mean?" As it would be revealed that only his back legs are the things that are propelling them flying up into the sky. Deku eventually would get super high with Uraraka before asking if she's safe, as Uraraka would blush and be like, "Yeah." So Deku quickly would fly towards the ground as both of them would begin plummeting down there, and last second Deku would turn the boosters on, making it so that he would just start like would land softly. He would take her towards the Recovery Girl and say, "Gotta go. Pops is waiting for me back home after all," as he would say, "I'll get your name next time." And so Uraraka would just smile, thinking about Izuku and blushing once more, as finally we would get Deku making his way back to the house, hanging out with his father who came out for a visit, and we would then get Izuku and Bakugo's point of view when the actual letters would arrive. Both of them would actually make their way towards each other's houses to open their letters respectively, and what would pretty much go down is we would have Bakugo's family at Izuku's house, as they would both open their letters right after the other, and they would both find out that they actually tied in terms of robot points. However, Deku beat Bakugo because of the rescue points, because Bakugo didn't defeat the 0-pointer to rescue anybody, but Deku did. So Deku's actually awarded 50 rescue points, while Bakugo was awarded nothing for defeating the robot. But I mean, he did show that he could destroy that thing. So as far as he's concerned, they're even. And so we would just get like this gigantic house party between Inko and Mitsuki's family. Just like they're just having a blast, you know what I mean? Celebrating the fact that both of their boys are actually going to be going to UA. And we would eventually flash forward to the direction. Sorry. We would just flash forward to the day of the actual first day of UA High. Deku and Bakugo would make their way inside of the classroom, and instantly Bakugo would just lay down, putting his feet on top of the desk, with Deku sitting right next to him, and eventually a young boy with blue hair would walk by, super tall and muscular, by the way, as he would go over to Bakugo being like, hey, take your feet off the desk right now, this is UA property, just going on and on about, you know, how he needs to like respect the equipment, and how there's been a bunch of students here and he needs to have some respect. But Bakugo would just turn to him and be like, why don't you shut up, kid? Get lost. As Ida would just look at Bakugo and be like, why, I never. And then Bakugo would go on to say what he usually says in the original about putting having a stick up his butt, you know what I mean? And right after that happens, Deku would just turn towards Ida saying, I suggest you leave Bakugo alone before he loses his temper on you. And Ida just turns towards Deku being like, what do you mean loses his temper? That wasn't losing his temper? With Deku saying, nah, he was being nice to you, trust me. He can be a lot more rude when he really wants to be. As we would just see like a little bit of like a forehead vein like popping out of Deku's forehead, reminiscing about all the dumb things that Bakugo was said to him while they're fighting, just to get him like fired up so that they could go at it even more. And you know, Ida would continue going on about Bakugo, as eventually Uraraka would walk into the classroom and she would go on to ask Deku for his name, as well as thanking him for saving her. Deku would just look at her and say, oh, the name's Izuku Midoriya, and that over there, that's Bakugo. As he would then inch closer towards her to her ear, being like, but don't talk to him, he's not good with the ladies. As Bakugo hearing that would be like, huh? What'd you say about me, you damn nerd? As Deku would just burst out into laughter and turn towards the back of the class, looking at his other classmates, as that's when Deku would finally catch a glimpse of the love of his life, or the soon-to-be love of his life. He would see Invisible Girl. And this would just be your stereotypical like main character sees the cute girl in the classroom and he's just enamored by her beauty. That's pretty much what would go down here. So Deku would instantly try to get up, making his way to go ask her name, ask her out on a date or something along those lines. But before he could do that, Izuku would be grabbed by a scarf, as he would quickly be told to sit down by Aizawa, who would be using his quirk on Izuku. As Deku would sit back down in the in his seat, realizing that he didn't have his quirk in that moment. And so Aizawa would go on to explain to the entire class what's going on, who he is, and to make their way outside. Quickly, they would all do so, and almost immediately once they're out there, Aizawa would throw a ball towards Izuku, being like, hey kid, throw this as far as you can. And Izuku would say, what's the catch? Is this some sort of test? And Aizawa would go on to explain that they're going to be going through a couple of tests, saying that the way that they've all been measuring their skills up to this point, it's a bad way to represent how they actually are. He would go on to pretty much explain that he wants to see exactly just how strong everybody in his classroom is, and so they're going to be taking a quirk apprehension test. As Izuku and the rest of the class would quickly realize what's going on, and Izuku would smirk before then saying, so, you want me to throw this thing as far as I can, huh? Izuku quickly would burst his hand into flames, as he would throw it as hard as he can, shooting flames behind it, propelling it even further than it would normally go, getting a grand total of 897 meters. As everybody in the classroom would instantly start getting super excited, being like, wow, that looks like fun! And they would all just start talking amongst themselves, as Aizawa, he kind of goes on to threaten them with his iconic line of, whoever comes in last place is expelled. As instantly all of them realize that, this battle or this test actually has a couple of stakes to it, so they realize that they have to sort of lock in. And so what we would get is pretty much just a montage of everybody doing their little quirk apprehension tests, with Deku being at the top of a couple of things and Bakugo being at the top of a couple others. Bakugo would have beat Deku at the ball throw and at the grip strength test, being a little stronger than Izuku, not by much, but a little bit. and Deku would have beat him in both the speed things and in the side-to-side. No, not even that. Bakugo would have also beat him at that. He would have beat him at like the push-ups and like the sit-ups and stuff like that. And that would mean that the order of students who passed would be, honestly, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that Bakugo would have actually ended up winning a couple more challenges, just because he definitely would have won the ball throw because his quirk is a lot more powerful here. He definitely also would have won the side-to-side jumps, and he would have gotten pretty high scores and all the other stuff, with Deku only beating him by a lot in the speed department because of his flame quirk and other things like that. So what I'm pretty much going to be saying is that Bakugo would actually get first place in the Quirk Apprehension Test, which is actually kind of funny considering that Deku knows he's stronger, but in this specific time, Bakugo took the W. So Bakugo would turn towards Izuku, smirking at him, as Izuku would just think to himself, whatever, and he would just look towards the direction of Hagakure or Toru or whatever it is that her name is, right? I think Toru Hagakure. I think that's her actual name. But what I will be saying, ladies and gentlemen, something that I didn't actually clarify is the fact that she's not invisible always. She's going to be having the same exact powers that the invisible girl has in the actual Fantastic Four team, right? She has the ability to not only turn invisible, but shoot like little like weird energy waves, I guess you could say. That's what she does, right? And she could also create force fields, which is going to be another really cool thing, but that's besides the point. Right now, Deku has "I want this girl" on the mind, and so he would walk towards her direction, just smiling at her, and she would actually smile back, not thinking much of Izuku, you know, not judging him or anything, but giving him a chance, as it would be at this moment that Uraraka would actually walk over towards Izuku and be like, "Hey, you were awesome out there," you know, and she would actually begin to talk to Deku, and like from Invisible Girl's perspective, it's like, oh, you know, he's already like buddies with her, like what's that connection about? You know, Deku's talking to her really nicely, and he would just be, you know, like distracted as Invisible Girl pretty much just walks away, and Deku wouldn't get the chance to speak to her that day, just talking to Uraraka and being nice to her, you know, actually flirting a little bit with Uraraka, just because that's just his nature, like that's just how Deku is in this timeline. But eventually he realizes that the girl that he wanted to flirt with actually walked away. So Deku would be a little saddened by this, and Bakugo, noticing this, would be like, "Huh, you loser, you messed everything up, you flirted with the wrong girl, didn't you?" And Deku would be like, "Shut up, Bakugo," as suddenly we would just get a time skip to the actual day where they're going to be having the Heroes versus Villains event. Now, in this specific timeline, Deku is going to be teamed up with Bakugo, and he's actually going to be going up against Todoroki and Kirishima, which is actually going to be a really cool matchup to see, considering the fact that Kirishima is actually going to be able to tank Bakugo's explosions pretty well, and we get to see a Deku versus Todoroki battle, which is flames versus ice, way earlier than we do get in the original. Plus, Todoroki's little daddy issues and problem with flame quirks is definitely going to be making for a really cool plot point for me to talk about. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, let me actually get into the battle. Immediately, All Might, after deciding all the teams that are going to be going up, he would quickly make it clear to the class that the first people up are Deku and Bakugo versus Todoroki and Kirishima. And the second that Deku and Bakugo like realized that they were on the same team, they kind of just looked at each other. Like, I don't know if you guys have had this happen before, like in science class or like any other class, you know, like group projects where it's like you get to pick with another person. Like, you just look at your friend and, you know, your friend looks at you and you guys just know you guys are going to work together. That's what pretty much happens. But Deku and Bakugo have this huge grin on their face, knowing that they're about to wipe the floor with whoever they're facing off against. And Deku, looking towards the direction of Todoroki, would realize that he was scowling at him, like giving him this death stare almost. But Deku just smiled and thought to himself, "I'm so gonna crush that guy." And so what would pretty much end up going down after this is that the four people would actually make their way towards the building. And almost instantly, as you would probably expect, Todoroki would freeze the entire thing. But with Izuku having the quirk that he has, Deku would almost instantly proceed to melt that floor with his fire quirk, as Bakugo would turn towards Deku and say, "Thanks for that. You know how I get at cold places." As you know, Deku would just look at him and say, "Don't worry about it. You want some sweat?" Shooting flames at the direction of Bakugo, with Bakugo sweating a bit and thinking, "Thanks. I'll pay you back for that, shooting an explosion at the side of Deku's face, as the both of them would say, whatever, we gotta get serious now. Making their way towards the direction where the actual bomb room, where they think that it's gonna be, they would make their way up each floor. And Todoroki would start realizing that it's getting warmer and warmer. Like the room would go from a normal like 70 degrees, you know what I mean? Like a normal room, or like 78 or something like that, to an extremely hot 111 degrees. The two of them would quickly start sweating, and Todoroki would shoot ice in that room, you know, to keep it cold, realizing that the ice that he had created had already started melting, and the ice that he had just created started melting as well? Question mark? But it would be at that moment that a nearby wall would quickly melt as Deku and Bakugo would step right out of there, and smoke would actually appear, with Todoroki quickly shooting a huge amount of ice at the direction of them, but Deku just holds one arm up, melting the ice faster than Todoroki can produce it, just leaving the ground entirely wet. Todoroki would quickly realize that this dude's flames are so fast acting that they literally leave his ice quirk practically useless. And so Bakugo, saying, "You don't get to have all the fun," would shoot towards the direction of the other student in that room, Kirishima, who quickly would harden his body, rushing at Bakugo's direction, who would throw explosion after explosion after explosion. But as the smoke would dissipate, it would become clear that Kirishima was not taking as much damage as he thought he was, and he could take a bunch of explosions. So Bakugo would quickly stop holding back and go full throttle on this dude, going crazy with his explosion quirk, leading Kirishima to eventually get so overwhelmed that actual pieces of his body start to crack, and it would become clear that Kirishima's hardening body just couldn't keep up. He needed to train even more. So Kirishima was quickly taken care of as Deku was slowly walking towards Todoroki, and more ice would become shooting out as Deku's entire body would be engulfed in flames. Or actually no, just his arm would be shooting out and his eyes would be like bursting with like a flaming aura, as you know, Deku would just be walking closer and closer to Bakugo, and everybody would be watching being like, whoa, his quirk is so cool. And other people would be like, but did you see Bakugo? He took him out like it was nothing, right? Like people would just be going crazy. And you know, Kirishima would be on the ground passed out since he was taken out by Bakugo, as Deku would be inching closer and closer, and Todoroki just getting angrier and angrier, being like, how dare you? As in that moment, Deku to Todoroki's eyes appeared to be Endeavor, and you know, Todoroki would just basically yell something out along the lines of like, get away from me, as he would begin shooting more ice at the direction of Deku, eventually leading to so much like melted ice that the actual area would actually begin to start being covered in water, and Deku's torso would start to pretty much be submerged in it, as they would all quickly realize that yeah, this battle is not going to go anywhere if he continues filling this entire area with water. And so Deku would just look towards Bakugo before then nodding, as Todoroki would look at Deku, seeing a bunch of fire constructs being thrown at him, Todoroki blocking with an ice wall, but instantly Bakugo shooting explosions would flip in the air, kicking Todoroki in the back of the head, knocking him clean out, as he would just fall into the water like face first, and All Might would just be heard in the loudspeakers being like, hero team wins, as that would be the first time that Deku and Bakugo are shown to be working together. Following this, we would pretty much jump cut to the day of the USJ incident, as we would zoom in on Deku's point of view, and he would be sitting in the back of the bus with Bakugo, both of them talking about things, with everybody talking about Deku's quirk, and Deku looking at Uraraka, or not Uraraka, but looking at Hagakure, just like staring at her, making it so obvious that he likes her, and like just, you know, like wanting to go sit next to her and talk to her. But Hagakure was actually like looking at Deku and just like thinking to herself that that dude is so much of a show off, like that he's just not her type. Like sure, he's really attractive, but like he's a player and she doesn't go for players, considering the fact that after the 2v2 battle would have happened, you know, a bunch of the girls in UA would have like glazed him and Deku would have accepted all the praise, just like looking at Hagakure, who would kind of just like look away from Deku, being like, I guess I had you all wrong, Izuku. You know, like she'd be thinking that to herself, being like, you know, like Like I don't date players, you know what I mean? And this is not exactly going to be one of your stereotypical like relationships that I usually do where like the girl just falls for Deku instantly. Nah. This is going to be one of those playing hard to get girls, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's sort of going to be like the storyline we're going to be going with. Like Deku's going to be trying to get her, but it's not really going to pan out too well. Anyways, you get the point. That said though, we would eventually find ourselves inside of the USJ right as Kurogiri would use his portal quirk. Now the second that this would happen, everybody would quickly begin to be on high alert. As Kirishima would say, "Awesome! You guys even got fake villains?" And Aizawa would jump off, like looking towards the direction of the villains going, "They're not fakes!" As he would pretty much just tell 13 to take care of the students. And so, Bakugo would go shooting towards the direction of Kurogiri, missing as Deku also would have done so and gone right through him, not actually hitting the real body of Kurogiri, but realizing that something was definitely within that body. And so, right as this would happen, Deku would be teleported to the water section of the actual USJ area. As Deku would realize that all these villains are around him and quickly freaking out, Deku just goes flame on, but he realizes he's underwater, so he's in grave danger, and one of the villains would come rushing at his direction. As before Deku could actually fight it underwater with hand-to-hand combat, Tsuyu would actually grab him with their tongue, saving him from that incident, as Deku landing on top of the ship would actually thank Tsuyu, before saying that now things will be a lot easier. Instead of taking them out one by one, he'll just boil them alive, shooting flames at the water, heating it up so much that the water begins to like start burning and actually boiling, and the villains would go rushing out of there as Deku practically turned that entire area into a way too hot tub. So right after that would happen, Deku would thank Tsuyu and would fly towards the direction of Aizawa, asking if he needs some help. Deku would begin facing off against a couple of villains alongside Aizawa, and it would be at this moment that Deku would quickly come to realize she's in danger too. And as Deku realizes that Hagakure is in danger as well, the Nomu would quickly come in and punch Aizawa in the side of like on his ribs, sending Aizawa flying across the room. As Deku, seeing the Nomu having just done this, would realize that even though he wants to go save Hagakure, he can't just leave his teacher here. I mean, he just saw what that monster did to him, and from his understanding, he was actually using his quirk eraser on that thing. So Deku, turning towards the Nomu, would shoot fire at it as the Nomu's like arm would begin melting, but Deku sees it start quickly regenerating, with Shigaraki laughing, saying, "The Nomu can regenerate, kid. You're dead, and so are the rest of you pitiful heroes." As from here, Deku's eyes would widen, but not for the reasons that you're thinking. Deku's eyes widen because he realizes that the longer that he stays here wasting his time, the more in danger Hagakure could possibly be in. So Deku quickly blitzes towards the Nomu, getting serious, realizing that that thing must not even be alive then, as he would quickly smirk, realizing he can finally go all out. Placing his hands on the Nomu's brain, Deku would shoot his like highest flames for a moment that would actually begin to like shoot out such a powerful light that would actually raise the temperature of the room to 100 and like 20 degrees instantly. Everybody just feels this huge heat wave around them as they're all like, like their skin starts burning slightly, and then the Nomu would just fall onto the ground with its head completely destroyed, and Deku glaring at Shigaraki as he would fly towards Hagakure, as Aizawa would quickly decay Shigaraki's quirk, proceeding to beat the mess out of this man with nothing but hand to hand, as Deku would arrive to Hagakure actually using a force field to defend herself from one of the villains. Deku quickly shooting flames at it, he would like send this villain flying away, as he would go in to ask her, "Are you okay?" And she would turn to him saying, "Thanks." As from here, Deku quickly turns to see that there's a bunch more villains, and so he would just quickly say, "Flame on!" as his entire body would be engulfed with the flame, and he just shoots flame constructs at these villains that are coming rushing at their direction, with him pretty much showing off for Hagakure and him turning back towards her, being super distracted as one of the villains would shoot up from the ground, going to attack him, like actually rushing at him with a knife, as she would say, "Look out!" And she would create a force field between the guy and Deku, as he would stab nothing, and she would quickly put it down, with Deku quickly grabbing this dude by the face and slamming him on the ground, using his flames to propel this attack, knocking him out as the villain's eyes would quickly shift to white, and he would just thank her, saying that he really ought to be more careful next time. And she would say, yeah, he should. Like blushing a little bit as, you know, Deku would look at her and he would just think to him, so finally I'm making some progress with her. As from here, Deku would just go on and take advantage of the fact that he can hang out with Hagakure for a bit, and he would just like be with her, being like, oh hey, I'll stay with you to help you out, as they would basically encounter no more villains until they make their way back towards where the rest of the class was at. And Hagakure would actually ask Deku, hey, why didn't you just use your flame quirk to fly us over here? We could have saved ourselves like 15 minutes, as Deku would turn back towards her direction and say, well, I wouldn't have got to hang out with you for 15 minutes. As, you know, like she would have a bit of a slight blush, being like, whatever. As she would think to herself, this guy's just a player, he's just a player, don't fall for it, don't fall for it. And, you know, ultimately Deku would just give her this big bright smile, with Hagakure just like not being able to help herself as she would quickly turn invisible, blushing and just like walking away, as the entire like situation would pretty much be averted. But unfortunately for the heroes, Shigaraki and Kurogiri would still have ended up making their escape, which pretty much just leads to a 1-week break for the class, as eventually everybody would return back to school being told about the UA Sports Festival. Immediately all of them get super hype about all of this stuff, and Uraraka would just start being like, are you ready? Are you ready? And Deku would just be looking at Hagakure as she would, you know, catch him like staring and quickly turn invisible, with Bakugo saying, so how's that going? And Deku would say, could be going better, but honestly, I'm glad. After all, good things take time. As he would just smirk, Bakugo would do so a little bit as well, and the both of them would just think to each other, I wonder who's gonna win this sports festival. But they would both quickly think, who am I kidding? I am. We pick our story back off during the events of the UA Sports Festival event. But before I go on, ladies and gentlemen, if you guys have made it this far into the video, then leave a like. Like, come on, don't be a freeloader. Leave a like on the video. You guys have already been watching it for 40 minutes, so do me a favor, leave a like and comment down what your favorite part of this video is. But let me get back into it, because it's already been a week since I haven't recorded this, and if I don't finish it now, I probably never will. So yeah, let me get back into it. Anyways, so what I think is probably going to be happening during the sports festival is we're just going to zoom in on Izuku giving the speech. And he's not even gonna be nervous or anything. I can straight up see this man just being like, are you ready? And like the crowd just being like super excited. And then he just like pauses for a second. He's like, I didn't think this far ahead. And they just start like laughing. He starts laughing as well as like, I'm kidding. And then he would just like pretty much hype everybody up, being like, we all made it this far, like do your best everyone, and remember, go plus ultra. As everybody would have a huge smile on their face, and Hagakure would be looking at Izuku with like a bit of a smile on her face, being like, he's a little different than what I thought. As he would walk towards Bakugo, dab him up, and then he would basically make his way where, you know, the rest of the class is at. After that would happen, I could see Midnight pretty much just announcing what the nature of the games they're going to be playing is. And then this is where we would pretty much just get the students all getting ready to take place in the UA race, right? The first event. This one, it's easily going to be going to Izuku, with Bakugo being second place, Todoroki in third, and the order of the other students placing just like you would expect. Just because, I mean, the second that the starter pistol would shoot off, Todoroki would try to freeze everybody up, but Izuku instantly would just be like, flame on! And he would shoot straight towards the ending of like the race, knowing that his race isn't with everybody. It's literally just with Bakugo. Bakugo and him would be like pretty close together, but Deku is like significantly faster than him. So even though like Bakugo can see Deku like ahead of him, he's not like falling that crazy behind, I guess you could say, right? But regardless, he wins. Like I said, Bakugo's in second place, and then right after that we pretty much end up having the Cavalry Battle. This is where I'm pretty much just going to be talking about who is with Deku and who is against him. Obviously Bakugo is going to be teaming up with him. Uraraka, you know, she still is gonna like Izuku, and you know, Deku would go up to Bakugo being like, hey Bakugo, like, are you want to team up? And Bakugo would just look at Deku and be like, nah, too easy, I'd rather go team up with somebody else. So now Deku was just sort of left there, like with Uraraka being his team member, and he would thank her for wanting to join him, as he would walk over towards the direction of Hagakure and like ask her, being like, hey, you want to be part of my team by any chance? Your quirk would probably help us a lot. Like, just gassing her up, you know what I mean? Like, being super nice. And, you know, she'd be like, sure, I guess. you know, just thinking like, I mean, you do have the 1,000,000 point headband. Just saying that to herself. She's like, yeah, I mean, I just want to be with him because he's strong and he could help me pass. Like, that's what she's thinking. But in reality, she's slowly falling for our boy, which, you know, my boy got it like that. But anyways, right after that would happen, another girl would go up to Izuku being like, hey, can I be part of your team? I can show off my babies, you know what I mean? And then, you know, Mei Hatsume would join. Following this, we would pretty much have the Cavalry Battle events. I'm not really a big fan of it, but let's just say that they pass. I'm going to say that Bakugo wouldn't go after Deku's headband just because he wants to face him in the last event, and Todoroki would be the only one trying to. But thanks to the fact that Deku has a fire quirk and he can pretty much melt the ice, he would do that. But upon first trying to like shoot flames at someone else, his teammates would literally be like, ah, that's hot. And so Deku would pretty much stop using his quirk, turning to Hagakure, being like, can you turn, I wonder, is she able to turn herself and things that are touching her invisible? Nah, I think that that's just too OP. So let's go with, she creates a force field around them, and everybody else trying to get to them pretty much realizes that they can't do a thing. So for the next 5 minutes, she straight up just has her force field up. She gets like really tired, but ultimately she's like, this is better than anything else. And Mei Hatsume is like, I don't get to show off my baby. She's like, oh, well, at least I get to pass ahead. Uraraka would be like kind of like blushing, like jealous of like the other girl that Izuku's clearly into. And so I'm not going to say she's going to try to like get in the way or anything. That's just not Uraraka's character. That's not who she's ever been portrayed to be. I mean, like, bro, she literally doesn't even confess her feelings for Deku just because she doesn't want to get in the way. So I don't ever in any universe see Uraraka doing something like that. It's just too out of character for her. And we're gonna say that we are going to just jump straight into the 1v1 battles. Immediately, Deku would actually go on and face off against Shinso. Now, the second that the battle would start, Shinso would just start going off with Deku. Now, here's where one of two things can happen. Realistically, Deku would talk back to Shinso because Shinso was doing a whole lot of talking. And Deku being sort of like a Johnny-esque character, there's no way he's not going to say something back to him being the big mouth person he is and like try to rush over towards him and being like, shut up, you know, like rushing towards him with like the flames. But with that happening, he doesn't have the one for all vestiges. He doesn't have anything showing that he's like he's capable of overcoming mind control. So realistically, he would straight up just lose to Shinso. And then there's the other path that we could take to the story where Deku, like hearing Shinso talk, just sort of stays quiet, shooting a flame attack at Shinso, shutting him up as, you know, Shinso gets sent flying off of the arena and Deku goes forward. Now, obviously, I could just have him fail, but then we wouldn't get the battle between him and Bakugo. We wouldn't get the battle between him and Todoroki, so I'm going to just pass him along. I think we can all agree that's going to make for a more interesting UA Sports Festival. But with that being the case, ladies and gentlemen, Deku does pass, and everybody eventually ends up getting to a point where they're all like in this really, really cool battle. Eventually, we would actually get a really interesting situation in which Bakugo would actually face off against Hagakure, not Uraraka. And so it would be an actually interesting battle. She would use her force fields to block Bakugo's attacks, turn invisible so that Bakugo can't see her, causing him to just start shooting explosions everywhere in the arena that would deal significant damage to both her and the stadium. And eventually it would become quite apparent where she is, so Bakugo, using his ability, would begin shooting more and more explosions, causing her to put up a barrier between them, as Hagakure would try her best to like beat Bakugo in some way, shape, or form, but because she doesn't have like any offensive capabilities, she wouldn't be able to do anything to Bakugo, who was pretty much staying out of her reach, making sure not to lose his cool. You get what I'm saying? And so Bakugo would end up landing a final blow, which would take her out, but he's a little gentle with it just because he knows that that is his best friend's girl that he's coming after. So Bakugo's not going to take it too crazy on her, even though he does land one explosion that does, you know, cause Deku to get a bit ticked off. But regardless, right after that, Deku would do exactly what you would expect him to do. Not get mad at Bakugo, because if that's what you're thinking, you're wrong. No, bro takes advantage of the situation to go comfort Hagakure and like would just sweet talk her, tell her she did great out there and that he'll get her get back, you know what I mean? Like, and she would just have like a smile on her face being like, thanks a lot. As Deku would say, don't mention, although I'll make sure to wipe that grin off of that Pomeranian's face, as she just starts breaking out into laughter. And Deku would walk out of the room that they were in as Bakugo would be standing outside just being like, Pomeranian, huh? Like angry, like explosions crackling off of his hands, with Deku being like, hey, chill, save it for the match. With Bakugo saying, you bet I will. Just make sure you don't lose to Icy Hot over there. As he would point towards Todoroki, and Deku would say, him? There's no way I'm gonna lose to him. Making his way towards where the arena would be at, as Izuku would actually end up bumping into Endeavor, and he would go on to say, hey, your son's over there. Better tell him to actually use both of his quirks, because if not, I'm gonna destroy him much faster. As Endeavor would be like, wait kid. He would then ask, your flame quirk, does it affect your body at all? And Deku would turn towards him and say, not at all, bursting into flames, showing Endeavor that he can even crank it up, beginning to get hotter to the point where even Endeavor can feel it. And like then Izuku would turn it off, walking away, with Endeavor thinking to himself that that kid's interesting. He would then go to Todoroki, bumping into him, and Deku, not caring about the situation, wouldn't like stay and eavesdrop or nothing like that. So Endeavor and Todoroki would have a bit of a conversation where Todoroki just ignores them. Not much of a conversation actually, but right after this we would finally get the battle between Izuku and Todoroki. And the way that this would go down is I'm gonna say that Todoroki would instantly start everything off with shooting ice geysers straight at the direction of Deku, just like he would do in the original, right? But unlike the original, Deku wouldn't use his finger to like shatter it, but instead he would just shoot a massive amount of flames at the ice, which would actually melt it upon contact, with Deku being like, huh, your ice seems to have gotten a bit colder from the last time. Just be like, guess I gotta crank it up. As Deku's flames would begin getting hotter and hotter and hotter, to the point where even like things in the arena would begin melting. Like the temperature of the arena itself would shoot up to an easy 125 degrees as everybody starts sweating and they're like, whoa, it's hot. Eventually Cementos would have to put up a wall of like cement around like the arena that like they're fighting in, so that the other like people around don't get hit by the heat wave. And even that wall would begin to get melted, with Deku turning his entire body into flames and just inching closer and closer and closer to Todoroki. Eventually, the heat would pretty much just melt the cement around them, and Izuku would be standing in front of Todoroki, who would finally use his flame quirk on him, as Deku would just hold his arm, the one that's on fire, and be like, you kidding me? These are your flames? Todoroki would grit his teeth and push his flames harder than he ever has before, and Deku would say, feels nice, kind of like a hot tub, or more like a lukewarm tub. This is nothing. As he would shoot a flame at Todoroki, which would straight up leave him like a 4th degree burn on his stomach, like a scar. As Todoroki would go flying out of the arena, and he would just be straight up unconscious, with Deku holding both of his arms up forward and saying that he's going for number 1, as everybody just starts cheering like crazy, and they're like, he took down Endeavor's son! He took down Endeavor's son, can you guys believe it? The crowd would go absolutely bonkers after this, and then Deku would finally find himself facing off against his best friend Bakugo. This final match would be a bit of a fun one, considering that Deku and Bakugo both sort of have an understanding that Deku is the stronger of the two, but regardless of that fact, Deku would shoot towards the direction of Bakugo, with Bakugo shooting an explosion point blank at Deku's face, sending him flying back a bit, but Deku using his his flames would stay in the air, as this would be more of an aerial combat like fight, where both of them would be in the air shooting flame attacks at each other. Deku creating flame fist constructs, flaming arrows, flaming javelins, like flaming everything you could think of, just like flame constructs to attack Bakugo. Bakugo would dodge out of the way with them, with his explosions quickly shifting directions mid-air and like moving in such like an unorthodox way that Izuku's attacks wouldn't land as much, with Bakugo shooting AP shots at Deku in the air, trying to catch him lacking, eventually getting closer and shooting more larger explosions that pretty much end up hurting him due to the recoil, right? And Deku would start getting beat up a bit, but it would be at this point that Deku would turn the heat up so much, grab Bakugo by the shirt, throwing him up with flames behind him, as Bakugo would dodge out of the way of the flames that could have actually hurt him really bad, and then Deku would go shooting towards the direction of Bakugo as he would uppercut him, and Bakugo's eyes would just turn white for a second, as he would practically go unconscious, wake up right the second that Deku was gonna rush in for another attack, and Bakugo would proceed to grab Deku by the arm, mind you his entire body is flaming, and like break Deku's arm in that second, From here, Deku, realizing that his arm got broken, he turns the heat up to the max, which would actually send Bakugo hurling into the ground completely unconscious, mind you, as Deku shoots down and goes, "Damn it, Bakugo, why did you have to break my arm?" As he would go grab Bakugo and land on the ground, putting Bakugo like safely onto the grass, making sure that he was the winner. As from here, Deku would have a bit of a scowl, and eventually he would go to see Bakugo in the nurse's office right after their battle would be over, being like, you just had to break my arm, didn't you? As Bakugo would smirk and be like, guess this Pomeranian was a bit more than you bargained for, right, Izuku? And Deku would just look towards him being like, whatever, Bakugo, just make sure to treat those hands of yours, I hope it was worth it. And Bakugo's hands would low-key be scorched because he straight up touched Izuku, who was on fire, you get me? So, you know, both, like, Deku's in an arm cast and Bakugo's hands are like taped up with tape so that they don't get hurt anymore, like infected, you know what I mean? Right after this, they would have the medal presentation stuff, and then we would finally get everybody going back to class, where once there, they would all be picking their hero names. And here is where something kind of funny is going to happen. Izuku instantly knows what he wants his hero name to be. It's going to be Human Torch. He's thought about this since he was a little kid. And Bakugo would pick King Lord Explosion Murder, being told no, as, you know, eventually he settles on Dynamite. Right after that, though, we would pretty much end up getting a section where Deku would notice that Hakakuri is having a bit of a hard time picking her name, as Izuku would go up to her and say, "Hey, what's wrong, Invisible Girl?" As, you know, after she hears that, she'd say, "What did you say?" And Izuku would say, "Invisible Girl," as she would say, "Thanks so much," smiling to Izuku, as she would say, "That's gonna be my hero name. You helped me pick it, so thank you." She would go to the front of the classroom being like, "This hero name was inspired by someone who helped me out a lot, a great friend of mine." She would say Izuku, and then she'd say, "My hero name is," showing it to the class, being like, "Invisible Girl." Everybody would be like, "What? Like, dude, that name is literally perfect. Like, it suits you so well." And she's like, "Yeah, I know. Like, I had such a hard time thinking about it." And Deku just said it like on a quirky way. And then like everybody would just be like, "Oh, Deku, like you mad lad," you know what I mean? As Deku would just be smiling. And then right after this, we would have them all picking their hero internships. Here, Deku is going to be receiving an offer from Endeavor. And when Deku sees that, he would have a slight grin appear on his face. He would turn to Bakugo and be like, "Guess who sent me an internship offer?" With Bakugo being like, "Who?" And Deku would then go on to say, "Number 2 hero Endeavor." As Todoroki hearing that would be like, "My father sent him one too?" As Todoroki would begin thinking about his embarrassing loss to Izuku, just kind of listening into the conversation, deciding, like, trying to see if Izuku was going to accept it. And Deku would be like, "Well, I guess I know who I'm going to be interning with. There's nobody better to learn how to use my flame quirk to save people. I'm definitely going to intern with Endeavor." As after Todoroki would hear that, he would sort of just have a grimace on his face, as he would think to himself, guess that takes the old man off the list. And he would just like start sort of resenting Izuku, because from the moment that he met Izuku, he just didn't like him. Now, at first it was a bit of a prejudiced dislike, where it's just more of along the lines of like, he has a fire quirk, he sort of like reminds me of my father, just in quirk. So Todoroki wanted to defeat Izuku just to show that his father's quirk was useless and that flames were nothing to his ice. But the first encounter, Todoroki got absolutely dismantled. The second time, he got beat in front of millions of people. So that made Todoroki start to sort of resent Izuku. And right here, he knows for a fact that what Izuku was doing was on purpose. There's no way that Deku just decided to say it out loud, and say it so loud, in fact, that he was gonna hear. Make sure that Todoroki heard it as he was walking past him, shoulder bumping him, being like, "Guess I'm gonna go with Endeavor," and like turning back to look at him. Like, Todoroki knows what's up. And at this point, he's just getting annoyed by Izuku, just by the fact that, like, why is he messing with me? Like, sure, we fought or whatever, and I don't like him, but like this is just like, he's doing the most right now, Todoroki would be thinking. As, you know, as this would be happening, and Todoroki's just deep in thought, Izuku would then be approached by Hagakure, who would actually tell him like that's awesome that he's going with the number 2 hero. As Izuku would be like, "Yeah, who are you gonna intern with?" And then she would go on to say that she is going to be interning with You know what would be kind of funny? If she went to go intern with that one girl, that Momo, and that one girl, Kendall. Like, she went over there as well and ended up learning about the fact that, you know, there is not exactly any training here. It's just posing and looking pretty. So, you know, she would learn the whole, like, good-looking fashion side of being heroes. I guess it's a positive, you know, like, she doesn't have to discover that on her own when she grows up. But I don't think that that's the kind of hero Hagakure wants to be. She would practically hate her internship offer that she ended up getting. And what I could see happening after this is Izuku just making his way towards the Endeavor agency, where he would instantly meet that one girl with the fiery hair quirk, like it's a green quirk. I think her name is like Burn or something like that. But he would run into her and quickly become acquainted to her. She would say, "Your quirk is awesome." She would ask, like, "Can your hair become fiery like mine?" As Deku would say, "Sure can," lighting it into flames, as she would say, "Huh, bit different from mine, but it's still just as cool." As Izuku from here would go on a smirk, and then he would make his way towards Endeavor's agency, where Endeavor would just be waiting on a chair, like doing some paperwork, as Deku would finally walk in and be like, "Hey, old man, what are you gonna teach me?" And Endeavor would just be like, "So you decided to come." As Izuku would say, "Wouldn't miss it for the world. Where's that son of yours?" As Endeavor would be like, "Huh, he decided to decline my offer. So I'm gonna make sure I turn you into a powerful hero. That way he's forced to acknowledge how good I am at training," or something like that. He would just say, "So I guess I'm gonna have to train you." Yeah, more along the lines of that. I don't think he would like say his intentions, but I think more or less he would think that, and then he would say something along the lines of like, "I'm gonna mold you into a perfect hero. So get ready, kid, because these next couple of days are gonna be grueling." And so would begin Izuku's agency with Endeavor, learning all the tips and tricks from Endeavor that he could possibly teach him, and eventually he would find himself on a jet making his way towards Hosu City, as there would actually be a huge reports of the hero killer there, and Endeavor's been wanting to catch him for quite some time. So when the Hosu City incident goes down like it would in the original, Izuku's still gonna find himself at Hosu, meaning that he still ends up inevitably bumping into the hero killer, saving Ida, and absolutely wrecking Stain. Because while Stain might be a tricky combatant to face if you have like a short range like fighting style, or like he had a different quirk or different power set from a different universe, it might be a bit more of like back and forth cool fight. But here, I'm not gonna lie, bro, Deku can just stay far away and shoot flames at Stain, you know, who could definitely try to like shoot daggers at Deku's face, but I can definitely see them straight up melting. Like, if something gets close to him, Deku could just shoot the flames up, making it so that those knives melt before making contact with him. So instead of that, I can see Deku flying in, landing between Ida and Stain, as he would hold one arm up, shooting flames in the direction of Stain, who quickly tries to throw a dagger at Deku, realizing that this kid is powerful, this kid is powerful. And right after that would happen, Izuku would pretty much turn the heat up, melting the knife, with Stain realizing this is a fight he's not gonna win. He would instantly try to run away, running from rooftop to rooftop, trying to escape Izuku, and this would pretty much start a runaway like chasing scene, where in the midst of Deku like running after Stain, like trying to go chase after him, we would pretty much end up having Nomu come flying in out of nowhere and like attack Izuku, sending him crashing into one of the walls, as Stain would end up getting away, and Deku would just have to burn this Nomu alive, beginning to look around, trying to see if he could find Stain at all. But Stain would easily have been able to get away after using that perfect distraction, and Stain would actually end up escaping, meaning that this is actually going to be having very, very negative effects for the villain side, because instead of Stain being captured and having that whole video of him going viral where he pretty much threatens the heroes, that never happens. However, instead, those members like Dabi, Toga, and Spinner, they don't end up joining. I think Twice also ends up joining because of the fact that, you know, Stain was like this huge popular character. So they're going to be losing out on 4 members, but they're going to be getting the original Stain. Or maybe they might end up joining. I feel like Dabi would end up joining regardless. Definitely not Spinner. We can give them Toga, but not Twice. Just because I feel like, or maybe we could give them, I don't know. Let's just take Spinner out of the equation and replace him with Stain, just to be more fair to the villains, actually. Just because I feel like Dabi's still going to join, Toga for sure, and then Twice, like, I'm not too sure about him, so I'm just going to leave that one how it is. And with that out of the way, I think we can just get back into the story. Right after the whole like training incident and stuff like that happens at internships, they pretty much go back to school only to be having the hero race, where if you guys remember in the anime, they pretty much ended up having to save All Might, and it was like a little bit of a race where Deku shows off his shoot style for the first time, and Bakugo's like, what? You know what I mean? So there, Deku just uses his flame quirk to just absolutely dismantle everyone else. And then we would finally get the UA final exam section. Here, we would normally get like a really uninteresting section where Deku's like studying for it and stuff like that. And then we have like maybe him and Bakugo doing some studying back and forth at each other's house. But with this timeline, I'm going to take a bit of advantage of the actual studying section. And I'm going to be saying that Deku weasels his way into actually being Hagakuri's study friend, right? So they would pretty much study at each other's places every now and then, and this would give Deku the perfect opportunity to like make her laugh and stuff like that, and pretty much just create like more of a chemistry where it's just undeniable for Hagakure to be like, I don't like him, you know, like now she's like blatantly like thinking about him, trying not to, but she's just having like the hardest time of her life. And so what would pretty much end up taking place is Deku's like just securing more and more points with Hagakure, pretty much leading us to... Also, one quick thing I do want to mention is like, I know that she's usually fantastic, you know, like Fantastic Man's girl, but bro, come on, like she's the only other like X-Men, did I just say X-Men? No, I'm sorry, Fantastic Four member. Obviously, I probably could have done something with Kirishima to have made it like a different X-Men, but as I tried thinking about it, there was nobody to fit the whole like Fantastic Man like role where he like stretched and stuff like that. So I decided to like scrap that whole idea of forming the Fantastic Four in this version. I mean, I could probably still do it with Kirishima and Bakugo, but I don't know. It just seemed so like weak. But if you do want to watch a version where I do make like an X-Men type thing, I did make a what if Deku was a Fantastic Man, or like what if he had like elastic powers. So go check that one out. That one's a pretty good what if too. But moving forward, Deku gets a great score in his final exam, and we would eventually find ourselves in the situation where Deku is going to be facing off against, I'd like to say All Might, but I'm just not too sure, just due to the fact that like in the original they only matched up against All Might because of the fact that like they didn't like each other and they got in each other's ways, and that's why they faced off against All Might. But in this timeline, they work so well together that like it would just not be a good idea to put them up against All Might, where it's just like they're gonna destroy him low-key. And considering the fact that I really don't want to think about who they're gonna be fighting, I'm just gonna say that it stays the same. So yeah, let's just keep that the same and say that, okay, let me think about the battle real quick, because like I'm not entirely sure how I want this to go. Okay, I think I figured it out. So just picture it like this. Deku and Bakugo would pretty much just be walking like in the middle of everything, just kind of baiting All Might to show up, and All Might would finally do so, you know, like looking like a villain, just being like, so you heroes have come, well I won't let you escape. He would rush towards Bakugo's direction as Bakugo would speed blitz like out of the way of like dodging him so fast. He almost looks like he was standing still for a second, and All Might blitzes in like trying to hit him, but nothing happens. Deku from here would create a flame screen so that All Might would basically be encased inside of a circle of flames. And then right after that would happen, Deku would land in the middle of it, turning towards All Might saying, let's dance. As from here, they would both like rush in at each other, but the second that All Might would throw a punch, Deku would create a flame construct punch that would clash with All Might, and Deku would create two Gomu Gomu fists looking like punches out of flames that would swing towards the direction of All Might, punching him away straight through the flames as All Might would go crashing into a building. Right after that, Bakugo would come flying in with the howitzer impact right at the building. As All Might got even more damage dealt to him, Deku would come flying in, landing attack after attack on Bakugo's body, with him using like boxing slash like Muay Thai like weird fighting styles that would be like enhanced with like flames. Think like Natsu with his Dragon Talon, Fire Dragon Fist, stuff like that. Like that's what Deku would be doing to All Might, followed by Bakugo being like die, 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 like throwing explosion after explosion after explosion on All Might. Eventually, I can see All Might grabbing both of their arms, with Bakugo shooting an explosion in Bakugo's with All Might's face like one last time, and him like slamming Bakugo down, and his other arm getting practically burnt by Izuku, but he still grips it and like would throw him away into a building. Right after that would happen, Deku and Bakugo would both get back up, Bakugo taking more of the damage, and he would then shoot more explosions at All Might's direction, eventually leading him to throw one gauntlet at Izuku, as he would say, "Do it!" And Deku would hold the gauntlet behind his arm, just like Bakugo does when he's like getting ready to shoot an explosion, shooting it opposite from him, sending him flying towards All Might, as Deku would go rushing in like Raiden from Mortal Kombat, like just straight at his stomach. And this attack would just absolutely decimate All Might. Like, not only is this attack extremely potent, but I could see it happening where when Deku lands this attack, he accidentally would hit All Might in his weak spot. And this causes All Might to get sent flying into a building where the students can't see what's happening anymore, right? And then it pretty much happens where Deku would end up getting the reveal of All Might's fake like body, like his small Might form, right? Deku seeing this would be like, All Might, are you okay? And Bakugo would shoot explosions over there, making his way there, as they both get the realization that their hero All Might like straight up looks like a skeletal version of himself. They would both think to themselves that they might have killed All Might. And then All Might would cough, turning into his big form, like quickly being like, sorry about that. Then pretty much having to explain to them what's happening, and they would both pretty much have to promise not to tell anyone about what they saw here today. From here, they would both be thinking about this, just like at home, conversating about this, like where Deku's like, I didn't think that was the case, but he's like, it makes sense. Like all my hero work has been declining ever since like that specific day. And Bakugo in the background would just be like, shut up! Who cares if All Might's been declining? He's still the #1 hero. But that won't last much longer. It doesn't matter if he won't be able to be a hero forever. After all, we're gonna take his place one day, right, Izuku? And Deku would look at Bakugo being like, of course we are. As after this, they kind of just dropped the subject, both thinking about it a little bit and eventually making their way towards school, where they're finally told about the forest training exams, or not exams, but the forest training arc. They would make their way there, and like you would expect, Mandalay would pretty much throw them off of the cliff. And then, they're pretty much just forced to fight against a bunch of monsters. They easily do this. I mean, bro, they have Deku and Bakugo there, plus Todoroki's there, so, it's pretty much a breeze. And then eventually, once they do get to the actual like training area, Deku and Bakugo would both be like decently tired, not really wanting to show it, as Koda would finally make his way towards the group, and Deku would just be standing there looking at his direction and be like, who's the little guy? With Koda looking to him and just straight kicking him in the nuts, with Deku like falling down and being like holding himself, right? As he's like, you kid, why? And the kid be like, I hate heroes. As from here, funny moment, after obviously the funny moment is Deku getting hit, but right after this, Hagakure actually rushes over towards Izuku, being like, are you okay? And then Bakugo seeing this would be like, you sly dog. You could have shot flames at that kid's leg, causing him to not hit you, but you let it happen. And then like we get a realization that Deku let it literally happen because he knew Hagakure was going to react like this. So Deku proceeded to act like a baby just so Hagakure could like take care of him for a bit. And then eventually she would clearly realize that he was just faking. With Deku saying, what? I mean, I like having you like take care of me. As she just gets beat bright red, and Deku just starts laughing and being like, see, you do like me. She's like, shut up. And she straight up slaps Deku as she runs off. From here, Bakugo's like, you ruined it again, didn't you? And Deku's like, I wouldn't say ruined it. I'd say spice things up. As they would continue to just chill, and eventually we would have the training days go by. They're all just, pretty basic, like just normal training, I guess you could say. And so while everybody else is just getting their usual training, Deku's training would be a lot different. Because there's one thing that the hero Aizawa has been wondering about Izuku, and that is just how hot can this kid get? Not only that, but Todoroki and other people have been wondering that exact same question. But Deku, when he was a kid, he realized he can't exactly crank his heat up too much, because if he does, he literally melts everything around him, and he's discovered that it's just too dangerous to even take it that far. So Aizawa would have pretty much ended up special requesting a machine, the same one that would have been used in the Fantastic Four movie when Johnny was testing his powers, and so Izuku would finally get the chance to go all out. He would begin heating up to the point where he would remember towards middle school that it became so dangerous to use at Dagoma Beach that some water even proceeded to start boiling and just start dissipating. You get what I'm saying? Like when water boils, it starts to like disappear. So the tide started to like decrease, I guess you could say. And Bakugo even had to like go and find cover. Like that's how hot it got. Deku was having a hard time controlling it, so Bakugo straight up just had to like sit there and hope Deku could turn it off. And you know, luckily he could, but barely. He ended up like burning like a huge area of the sand, turning it into straight up glass. As you know, like I'm explaining it and like I'm not even doing it justice, like what it's happened. Because if this scene was animated, it would be so cool. But regardless, Deku would be going crazy up in flames, being like, I can go higher. I can go higher. Hey, is it cool if I go higher? And they're like, yeah, go for it. So Deku starts heating up even more. And then they're like, he's literally the temperature of the sun. Aizawa would then be like, Izuku, stop it now. And then Deku would not. Like he keeps going. He's like, I can go hotter. And like it gets even hotter and hotter and hotter. The machine starts melting. And right as it's about to explode, Aizawa would actually cancel Izuku's quirk, telling him, any hotter than that and you would have straight up destroyed the earth. As Deku looks at him and goes, okay, so I can't go that hot, got it. And Aizawa would say, under no circumstances can you go that hot. From here, Izuku would say, all right, not a problem, I won't do it. And Aizawa would just like look at Deku as he walks away, and like he's just in utter shock. He's like, how in the world is this kid able to get that hot? Like that shouldn't be feasibly possible. This is a quirk, right? And like he knows it is because of the fact that like he can turn it off, but like, bro, this is not normal. Like this kid is reaching levels of heat that are just like world breaking. You get what I mean? So to say the least, he's really shocked. But regardless of all that, eventually we do get the whole Muscular versus Izuku fight, and the lead up to this fight I think is going to be a bit different because I don't think Izuku's necessarily going to be like going to Koda for the same reasons. He just wonders like, what's up with that kid? Like, why does he hate heroes so much? It's so strange to Izuku because he's never met a kid who didn't see like heroes and was all like, oh, heroes, you know, like they're the best, you know. So Izuku does genuinely want to know like, what's up with this kid? So he follows him, and eventually like he just like eavesdrops on him and hears the kid crying. He just stays there listening into the conversation, as eventually Hagakure would have actually ended up following him and would reveal that she was there, like scaring Deku, being like, oh, you scared me. And then like holding up like the shush like symbol, like the universal, like putting his finger on his mouth, being like, shh. As Hagakure watching this would look towards Izuku and be like, okay, fine, I got it. And Izuku at this point would turn back only to see Muscular arriving, wondering what the heck this dude's doing here. Like, this training camp should be off limits for anybody else. Like this is private, you know what I mean? But then Hagakure seeing that would be like, Izuku, he's in danger. But Deku would just turn back towards her and be like, don't worry about it, I got it. He would say, grab the kid, turn invisible, and get out of here. As, you know, that's exactly what would happen. Deku would step out of the shadows being like, hey, you big lunk, what are you doing here? Don't you know this area is off limits to normal people? And Muscular would reveal who he is, with Koda being like, that's him. You're the guy that killed my parents. He's like in shock. He literally can't move. And Muscular hearing this would have a huge grin on his face saying, huh, so looks like I get to kill an entire family line. And Deku hearing that like this dude literally is responsible for killing his parents, Deku would think about how he would feel if Inko and his father Hisashi was taken away from him by this monster. His eyes would just go black, like basically this dude is so mad. And he shoots flames at Muscular, sending him crashing into the mountain as he just keeps shooting more and more heat. Like mind you, Muscular is really tanky when it comes to like physical attacks because he has shock absorption because of his muscles. But bro, ain't no muscles gonna defend him from flames. They're burning this dude. So his muscle fibers start getting torn to shreds, like they're getting burnt. And as Koda can't move, Hagakure grabs Koda and rushes off with him as he's like, no, he's the guy who killed my parents. He's the guy who killed my parents. And Deku would just say, don't worry about it, kid. Eventually Muscular's like muscle fibers begin tearing apart slowly, and Deku would look at Muscular like seeing like all of his muscles had basically had been burned and charred off, and he would say, you're not much without those muscles, are you? Grabbing Muscular by the shirt and flying up into the air, into the stratosphere where it's hard for him to breathe. From here, Muscular would begin being like not being able to get much oxygen, and Deku would say, make sure you say hi to the villain scum for me in hell, as he would throw Muscular from the sky into the actual like earth itself, into an area where nobody would straight up notice. And like, bro, Muscular's not going to jail. This dude's dead, bro. Like, he fell from that height. But at this moment, Deku would start like realizing like his flames got weaker, and he starts falling from the sky, realizing that no oxygen means no flames. He finally realizes he just did himself so dirty. And so as he's falling, he's trying to he's like, flame on, flame on, flame on, but nothing's happening. Right as he's getting closer and closer to the ground, finally you would just hear flame on as he shoots flying through the area, eventually rushing towards where Tokiyami and like the dude with the eye quirk is at. And he would get there, and like his flames would be so potent and so bright that Tokiyami is able to get control of his dark shadow, eventually leading to Izuku crashing into a tree and like being woken up by them, being like, hey, are you okay? Izuku wakes up realizing what had happened, and then would be like, all right, where's the rest of the class? They're like, oh, you know, we don't know, but I think we heard Bakugo this way. So they go in search of Bakugo, and when they arrive, they see that Todoroki and Bakugo just finished taking out this dude with the weird little teeth quirk. As from here, the group pretty much just ends up talking for a bit, realizing that all their other classmates are in danger. They go off in search of them, and so they would eventually run into Uraraka and Tsuyu, who would be facing off against Toya. Once this happens, we would pretty much have the same interaction where like this is all taking place, and Mr. Compress would kidnap both Tokiyami and Bakugo. And so what I can see pretty much happening here is that once Deku realizes that his friend got taken by him, he quickly would just be like, flame on, rushing towards the direction of Mr. Compress, who's like trying to get away from him with all his strength, eventually making it towards Dabi. The portal opened, he would lunge right into it, and Deku would jump straight into the portal, being like, nah, not today. As from here, both Deku and Bakugo are within the portal, and they're both looking around at the villains, just being like, so this is your cruddy hideout? Bakugo would be the one to say that, by the way. As Deku would say, this place has no class. I mean, seriously, where are the ladies at? As from here, you know, like Shigaraki would get a little angered by the fact that Deku's straight up talking down upon his little villain hideout, and Stain would be there, like Dabi would be there, Toya would be there, or no, not Toya, Toga, sorry. Twice, like all those villains are all there, just like watching Deku and Bakugo. From here, Deku and Bakugo both crack their like arms and knuckles, and we just get this like awesome scene where they proceed to absolutely dismantle these dudes, bro. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen an anime where like you have like your little main character surrounded by a bunch of bad guys, and then like the panel goes black, and then all the people are just laying on the floor bleeding and like beat up. That's what would happen here. They would destroy them so unbelievably bad that each one of them are just unconscious. Like, Dabi himself has even more scorch marks because Deku burned him. Bro, he burned a villain with a flame quirk. That's just not okay, bro. This dude straight up violated him. But right after that would happen, like Shigaraki's hands would literally be burnt, bro. Like, that dude is not using his quirk anymore. Twice he would be knocked out, having like Bakugo's handprint of explosions on him. Toga, bro, Bakugo straight up destroyed her because he knew Deku wasn't going to be doing that. He doesn't like hitting girls. And then we have Stain, who both of them ended up using like full power explosions, sending him like literally crashing out of the hideout itself. Stain is just unconscious, eyes white, like bro's out for the count. Deku and Bakugo from here would just turn towards each other, being like, those were the villains that everyone's been so scared of. They just start laughing loudly, and then this dark mist portal would open as All For One would be revealed, and we would just hear the like the opera music, like the creepy song that All For One has. Like all jokes aside, dude, that song genuinely gives me the creeps. Like, I don't know what it is, but like whenever I hear it, I genuinely get a bit squared. I get a bit squared. It's math class. No, but I do get a little scared when I hear that song. It like puts me on edge. I don't know what it is, but yeah, no. All For One would make his presence known, just doing the little iconic, like, good job, boys. I see I was right to try to take both of you. And then, you know, Deku's like, what are you talking about? He's like, I knew if I took Bakugo, like, he just starts lying, you know what I mean? But, I mean, no, that's not true, because he probably does want Deku's quirk, because it's, like, really overpowered. So, he's like, I knew that if I took your friend, you would come with him. and that would allow me to take your Quirk, shooting black tendrils at the direction of Izuku trying to take him out, but Deku would quickly dodge out of the way with Bakugo using explosions and the both of them turning towards All For One, as All For One would wag his finger with the both of them like shooting flames and like explosions at him respectively. They don't touch him because there would be like 3 barriers, and 2 of them got shattered and the last one was like looking like it was about to break. But he would just go out into a cackle being like, "You two are very promising hero students. It'd be a shame if you were taken out of the roots while you're still growing." You know, like think about it like a tree that like it's not done growing, so its roots are not as strong. And that's what All For One's pretty much making a reference to. Like, if he takes care of them now, they won't ever get to grow up to become a pain in his side. And so that's All For One's goal here. He wants to take care of the 2 biggest threats to his villain empire. And so we would just get this battle between Izuku and Bakugo versus All For One. They're like rushing at this man, and All For One is smiling. Like, bro's shooting like flames, or not flames, but he's shooting like energy air compressed waves at the direction of Bakugo and Izuku. Deku's shooting flames at him, but like he's using barriers. Like, the dude's using every and any quirk you can think of to pretty much counter them the best he can. And Deku would just turn towards Bakugo and say, "I have to use it," with Bakugo being like, "You do you," shooting a hole right through the rooftop and blasting out of it, as All For One would say, "Your friend's running away." He's like, "Nah, he's not running away. He's actually helping me out." As from here, the entire area would begin to start heating up. Like, you know when you guys get into your car and like if you have a leather seat, like it just straight burns you? Bro, that's what happens, but to the entire room. Like, it's hot. I don't know if you guys have ever had the displeasure of like touching the ground when it's like 115 degrees outside, but it is hot. And like it would be that, but it's like 160 degrees in the room itself. All For One is straight up sweating in his like suit, and Deku would say, "Didn't think I'd ever have to use this, but for you, I'll make an exception." He proceeds to fly around in circles around All For One, because if he directly shoots flames at this dude, like he's straight up probably gonna die. So All For One tries using a water quirk on Deku to calm it down, but the water evaporates too fast. And so as All For One is in the middle of this, he's trying to use like a barrier quirk or like an air quirk to like stop Izuku, but he's already going so fast and he would be inside of a flaming tornado like Dr. Doom. All For One literally melts inside of this thing. It's so hot that Deku doesn't know if he can control the heat at some point. And Deku's like continuing to spin. He's like, "Bakugo!" Bakugo's like super far, but even he's feeling the effects of the heat. This whole like town, like bro, the temperature of that whole area went up like crazy. And so Bakugo seeing all this go down, he's just like, "What do I do?" And then like Deku would be like, "You gotta help me." So now instead of All For One being the one that's the threat, it's literally Izuku. And Izuku's spinning and spinning and spinning, and everything's just getting hotter and hotter and hotter. Like it's all getting worse. Eventually it leads to Bakugo realizing like there's only one thing he can do. He would shoot forward towards the direction of Izuku, revving up his most powerful explosions. Like both of his gauntlets with like the explosion, he pulls both pins, holds both of his arms out, knowing this is straight up gonna probably break his arms because of like the recoil. And so he shoots a full power explosion at Izuku, which would like send him crashing into a building, melting it, like melting the spot where he crashed into, getting to the ground as he melts into the ground like 18 feet into it. And finally would be like, "Thanks, Bakugo," with Bakugo's arms being broken and like looking at Deku just being like, "Whatever, nerd." As you know, from here, you know, the heroes would end up arriving and Deku ends up telling All Might about what happened, like explaining to him the All For One situation, how, you know, all this crazy stuff went down. And, you know, All Might would just be like, "Okay, like that is insane." As from here, we pretty much just get a cleanup situation, and right after this would take place, we get the, I believe it's the Quirk Apprehension, no, not the Quirk Apprehension, but like the hero license exams? Yeah, the hero license exams. I'm not gonna lie, I don't like this arc, I'm skipping it. But just know, Deku passes, Bakugo passes this time. You know, he doesn't fail like in the original. Oh, and another thing that changes in this timeline is that Bakugo and Deku don't end up fighting because Bakugo never like has the feeling that it's his fault that All Might can't go on to become a hero, or not a hero, but like he can't continue his hero work, right? So none of that whole like interaction ends up going down, and instead we pretty much just get the introduction of the big three heroes, pretty much leading us into the Overhaul Arc. But now that the big bad is taken care of, we pretty much just end up having 3 significant scenes that are going to be changing in the My Hero timeline. Like, I don't know what it is, but once we get to this section of the story, most of the time Deku's already trained up so much that like villains like Overhaul, Redestro, and like stuff like that, they don't end up posing much of a threat. And the only way that they could pose a threat, like moving on, would be if Shigaraki would get his like crazy upgrade powers, but there's no world where a powerful Deku ends up letting something like that happen, unless, you know, I write the story into that direction. But then the video is just like so long and it just gets like really annoying for me to cover. So what I am gonna say is Deku meets Mirio and he gets a shell shock moment, because Mirio in this timeline is actually gonna be the wielder of One For All. So this means that Mirio is pretty much the only person that can like pretty much counter Deku, right? Like if he punches Deku, he kind of burns his hands, but like he has to. And he would knock Deku out with a gut punch, going like faking for his eyes, punching him in the stomach, leading Deku to be like, dude, I like this guy. And then we would pretty much get Deku going on an internship with Sir Night Eye. This would essentially lead us to the alleyway scene where in the original Deku and Mirio let Overhaul get away, but bro, Deku's not letting that happen. And not even just Deku, but Mirio is not letting that happen. Like this time around, Mirio is so powerful, he understands that if he really wanted to take Overhaul out by himself, he could. And so that's exactly what happens. Deku seeing this with like grit his teeth, being like, he told me I can't, but I have to fight this guy. Like I can't just let this dude continue to do what he knows is horrible to this girl. But before Deku could even act, Mirio would just take this dude out so fast, with Deku seeing sparks of lightning shooting off of Mirio, and Deku being like, is that? Like that was lightning coming off of him. So after Mirio takes Overhaul out, he questions him. He's like, what was that? And Mirio pretty much is forced to tell Izuku about the fact that he's the successor to All Might. Deku would start getting super hyped, being like, really? Like, dude, that sucks. Like, that means you're going to be my competition then. And, you know, Izuku would be like, guess you're going to have to compete with me and Bakugo. And Mirio's like, nah, you guys are going to compete with me. They just, like, start laughing. And then from here, they tend to, like, Eri, being like, hey, like, are you okay, little girl? And then right after that pretty much ends up taking place, the heroes would end up taking Eri in, training her up to be a hero, and Izuku and Bakugo pretty much just have nothing but their hero course training stuff left to do. So with all the other big bad villains essentially being taken off of the chessboard, this is where the story pretty much wraps up. After this, it's just a bunch of really like cool school events and stuff like that, but Deku being the strongest just pretty much leads to an anticlimactic thing where he's just always winning. And while, you know, it's sort of fun to go into detail, that's what's been happening this entire story basically, so it gets a bit redundant. So ladies and gentlemen, with that out of the way, if you guys enjoyed this video whatsoever and it provided you guys with some entertainment while you were cleaning, while you were working, while you were gaming, while you were driving, just whatever, please leave a like on the video for me. But with that out of the way, I love each and every single one of you guys. Have a blessed day. I love you. Peace.